What I did find out is in these conversations, I can keep on trying to educate or convince or sell right to someone, and it's just the message doesn't get through. But when the customer has the needs that I'm talking about, it is crystal clear. Like that's a customer that usually does not need any explanation.
Welcome to 20-Minute Leaders. Just sit back, relax, and learn from the leaders of today. It's a journey. Each one is different, unique, inspiring. Let's get started. This episode is powered by J Ventures, a community-driven VC fund in Silicon Valley in partnership with Leumitech, sponsored by Homeward Ventures, Hippo Insurance, Upwest Labs, Synergy Global, Hillel at Stanford, Leap, Birthright Excel, Serona Partners, and in media partnership with CTech. Welcome to 20-Minute Leaders. Today we are back in the cloud with Mati Lerner, the co-founder and CEO of Ridge. Mati is co-founder and CEO at Ridge, the world's most distributed public cloud. Mati invests and advises early-stage companies, and he has an MBA from London Business School. Mati Lerner, welcome to 20-Minute Leaders. I'm really excited to have you here. Thank you so much for joining me. How are you?
All good, all good. Excited to be here. Hopefully we'll have a good talk.
I'm sure we will, because pretty much everybody's in the cloud. And if they're not in the cloud, then they're thinking about the cloud. And if they're not thinking about the cloud, then they really should be thinking about the cloud. And so we're at a really interesting inflection point where we have all these solutions and we have this technology. We understand the potential, we sort of understand the deployment, and we understand how to manage it. But now we're in the process of actually making it happen. And so with Ridge, you're doing some really interesting things that are non-trivial in relation to the cloud. And so I'm really looking forward to, hearing your personal perspective on this industry, what you're personally doing with Ridge, and what excites you about it. So thank you for spending these 20 minutes with me. Tell me a little bit about cloud computing from your perspective, even before Ridge. Where are we at?
I mean, I think we're at a place that, to us as, people who are around startups and are kind of digital and modern, cloud is a no-brainer. It's a total commodity today. The majority of people we interact with in a day-to-day don't think about things, that used to be called IT. It magically happens. When in fact, IT and cloud is just a form of IT. You just consume it on someone else's resources, is a huge hassle. I think it's a massive asset, right? And it's kind of the underlining of every single company in the world, digital or not digital, has massive IT operation under it. And things that, used to, just to give you an example, when I started my career, I was at 888 in Israel. The first floor, 150 people only dealt with IT for a mid-sized company. It's not even a big company globally. And what cloud did is changed that, right? So essentially you can consume all of the IT best in breed, on demand, scalable, secure, performant, without the need of dealing with something that is external to your business, IT. It's in the same way that, a company doesn't build its own building, you outsource it to a constructor. The idea is I shouldn't be dealing with the physical servers and the connections and the gateways and the load balancers, because maybe there's someone that in a centralized way can fix it. So while we as kind of a cloud native generation think about cloud as mostly the only thing, the reality is that 85% of the IT in the world is still consumed outside of a public cloud. Public cloud to me being AWS, GCP, Microsoft Azure, and a long tail of other providers that are also quite big. DigitalOcean, IBM, Oracle Cloud, there's kind of quite a few, that all of them making a few billions a year in revenue. But definitely there's three main players in the market. So 85% is still consumed outside of a public cloud. And there's all these companies that are working super hard on it. And there's many reasons why that's the case. It might be because of mostly technical difficulties. So legacy applications, you go to Siemens, Bosch, all those companies, they have real requirements. They have 40, 50 years of IT spent in whatever they're doing, and they can't just take everything and chuck it onto a public cloud. There might be regulatory considerations, so data locality, data residency, that are very, very specific. There's performance issues. Like sometimes you need your servers to be very close to wherever you're doing the wherever the application is deployed, that close to your customers, close to where data is being generated. And while the big hyperscalers are again phenomenal, they're quote unquote only in 20 odd locations around the world. Best locations, but only 20, while the world is slightly bigger than 20 locations. So what Reach does, right? What is the problem that we're trying to solve? If you take those three facts that I just mentioned, majority of IT, vast majority of IT, consumed outside of public, the hyperscaler, the public cloud. Kind of the second underpinning of this is that the world is moving to cloud native, while perhaps you're not consuming it on a public cloud. You still want to have all the good stuff that comes with a public cloud. CI/CD pipelines, DevOps tools, fancy logging, elasticity, paying on demand, all of those things that, come with the public cloud. You want someone else to take care of the underlying IT. And the third fact is there isn't an easy way to consume resources cloud natively outside of a public cloud. And what Reach has done, it's created a full stack of full cloud operator that is agnostic to the underlying physics of where it runs, right? So what it means is that we're able, essentially, and this is the core technology that we've built, we have a lot of capabilities and features, but the core technology is that we're able to overlay the Reach Cloud that looks and feels a lot like GCP, AWS, Azure, on top of anything that any customer might have. And that goes in two ways. We can take private instances. Again, as I said, we can go to a Bosch, a Siemens, right? Like a multinational that has IT environments scattered all over the world, and overlay our solution without installing anything, without, making them buy specific hardware, just through very fancy API and a lot of capabilities on our side, and have for them private instance that looks like a public cloud. The other thing that we've done for cloud native companies, right? So if you're a startup, you'd say like, I don't have any servers because I don't think that way. I'm working on AWS, but I need to be in Istanbul for whatever reason, or in the UAE, or in Brazil, or like in many places where perhaps AWS is not enough, AWS, GCP, Azure are not enough. So in that case, what we've done is we've partnered with hundreds of different providers, local providers. So those would be the top tier providers for each market. So you think from anyone from like the Equinixes of the world, like the biggest infrastructure providers, the NTTs, Deutsche Telecoms, down to a local provider in a specific country where perhaps a global player isn't present, but still very good, kind of high reliability, in most cases, even higher than the public cloud, because they host the local banks, the local insurance centers, the local government. So essentially, we also created all these partnerships that allow us to serve our cloud in a modern cloud way where you can pay by the minute on demand. That's about it.
So first of all, it sounds really interesting, because one trend that you're describing here is taking the very generalistic approach that says, let's create a solution that with a click of a button you can deploy however many resources that are independently scalable and have pretty much no limits on this public cloud. And you're saying, oh wait, but actually, the way that a lot of problems are built is that you need this granular approach, where you need to have control and you need to have preferences over the location, over the different types, over the different activities that are happening there. And so you're taking the generalistic technology or the new consumer behavior that we've adopted, which is the general public cloud, but you're assimilating it to specific nuances that different companies like these large companies that you mentioned, that they have themselves. Did I get that right?
You're exactly correct. So, flexibility is a key point here. Again, AWS, GCP, and Azure are phenomenal for many reasons, but that they cater for the 80% that are good to come to them. And if there's anything specific, it's great, but it's not what they can solve. And that's where we try. So, in fact, public clouds we're riding the tailwinds of public clouds. They're creating all this massive cloud adoption. And, 100% of the customers that are using Ridge also use a hyperscaler. right? No one will move to a cloud because of reach. What they're saying is like, hey, like the public cloud is phenomenal, but I need it to do more than it currently does. How can I do that without kind of re-engineering or reinventing the world? And Reach is that easy way of doing that.
I love it. So essentially, you're saying, we understand that there's this market education that's been happening over the last few years.
Yep.
We've understood that there's a big gap here in the market, that while they're catering to 80% of the providers, there is a tail of those that need this specific granular approach, and we are able to provide them the solution. But take me now to sort of this moment where you're working with this executive from a large company, that you realize that they have this need, they share with you their different specific needs, that it happens to be that Ridge perfectly answers them. Now it sounds like they need to decide between Ridge, a startup, and using one of the three top providers that you mentioned. And this is talking about their uptime, it's talking about their reliability, about their deployment. How do you deal with that conflict of trust and experience?
Great question. So I have two answers to that. Our sales team does qualification calls with, a DevOps team. And the first question is like, hey, are you guys using the cloud? Usually the answer is yes. Who are you using? Let's say one of the big providers. Like, do you have any needs that are not being met? All the stuff that we just spoke about before. And if the answer is no, we're kind of happy, then say like, good, then like you're not our customer, right? So the point that I'm trying to make is like we're not competing with them. We're not trying to take customer, not because I wouldn't want to. It's just because those are great offerings. But as I said, put it in just in numbers, right? The IT market is over $1 trillion worth of spend per year. Okay, AWS, GCP, and Azure combined. Depends on how you measure. It's quite complicated to measure that, but they're about 150 billion in revenue, growing like crazy. But 150, so that's 15% or less than what the world spends on IT. And when I say IT, I mean telcos, banks, insurance, like healthcare providers, people that are not usually or not deeply into AWS, GCP, and Azure. And there's a correlation between size and complexity, right? If you're a 20-person startup, usually your application is just limited in its complexity. I'm putting aside edge cases of someone doing something super, super complicated IT-wise. The second thing is that a lot of our big interactions don't happen directly, right? So as you mentioned, we are about 3 years old. We're, 40, 50 people. We're growing. We're kind of going to double this year. But at the end of the day, it's still tiny compared to big IT players. So think of anyone like VMware, CA, like the biggest kind of companies in the world. So what we do is we either partner with those. So these guys have massive problems that they cannot answer around niches, not niches, but particular use cases of what our system is capable of doing. Distributed cloud, edge cloud, those things they don't really have a good solution to. And probably more interesting is the biggest solution integrators in the world. So the SIs, what they're calling the IT industry. If you think of, the Accentures, Infosys, Cognizant, Kindred, that was just spun out of IBM. We're kind of quite close to and looking into some fascinating technological projects. All of them have, 75%, each one of them separately is serving about 75% of the Fortune 500 type companies and the equivalent in every local market, trying to answer these crazy use cases without the tools. So there isn't a true competitor to what we do. IT is complicated, and there's many ways of doing the same thing. You can brute force a lot of the problems, but the truth is that like the world was operating quite well before public cloud was invented. So can things be done? Yes, but they cannot be done easily. And this is, I think, like the 10x of where we take IT environments into a cloud era with the simplicity of a public cloud without the need to rip out everything you've got and install everything from scratch. So it's kind of, I tried to establish before, we're not exactly playing for the same market as an AWS region would. There aren't great ways of solving what I'm describing here, right? So these guys are saying, hey, we're dealing with these kind of problems. this is insane. And we're at the beginning of this wave, right? Like there's a lot of education, a lot of conversations that we need to do for a million technological reasons that we need to kind of, the other side says, listen, this is what I've been dreaming about. I have a few problems on my side to adopt this. I'm not ready. I'm not containerized. I'm not this. I'm not that. But I think in the next 5 years, which is like infrastructure companies look at things a little bit differently than perhaps a classic SaaS company would, right? Like adoption wise, I think there's going to be a massive take in the next 5 years of these capabilities.
So then, talking a little bit about scale and growth, if we're looking at a more granular approach and those that need a different offering than what a self-serve product may be able to give them at this point, then how do you strategically grow Ridge with customer base that kind of needs guidance and needs a little bit more of the hand-holding approach to tailor the exact solution for their specific needs, which sometimes may not be that coherent when you just talk to them?
Great question. I'll start from the last comment. So it was totally not coherent for us for the first, year and a half, when we were still building. Again, as you can imagine, it's quite a heavy undertaking to build this product. So it took a while to kind of put it in a place that it can work in production with, like, again, big scale company, large scale companies working in production. So what I did find out is in these conversations, I can keep on trying to educate or convince or sell right to someone, and it's just the message doesn't get through. But when the customer has the needs that I'm talking about, it is crystal clear. Like that's a customer that usually does not need any explanation. It's just because he's experiencing it himself, and it's like super clear to them what we do, and like now it's details. How do you connect the network? How do you do that? How do you do the app? Like it's so that's kind of just to start from the last bit of the question. I think, again, the other thing that we found out is that traditional also companies feel comfortable buying from who they've been buying before. So it's precisely not a self-serve, 3 clicks optimizing for quick onboarding. Like we are, unfortunately, in a world of heavy enterprise sales through big resellers and big it's not middlemen, but like engineering groups that help us kind of distribute the product. Usually we are part of a broader solution that they're offering, sometimes a physical solution, sometimes development capabilities, right? Like a project that is, and this is like a layer in that, usually the heart of the system. But what that helps us is surpass that kind of the need to convince massive companies that, not even us, that this is the solution, that this is the direction that they should be even looking at. So kind of going through massive players like those that the end customer already knows and trusts makes our lives a lot easier.
Amazing. It sounds like beyond the technological undertaking, it's the true understanding of these different use cases and being able to generalize them internally, being able to come up with a coherent strategy as to how to make it happen and grow this company. And I love what you said before, even before we started, about the magnitude of what you're building here, and the idea behind the moonshot. But if it works, and it sounds like it is, and it's a great undertaking for for the economy and for changing the thought process that it's okay to have different use cases. And while everybody's screaming, okay, move to the cloud, just deploy single serve, blah, 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 at the end, there's complexities, and different organizations need different things with different technologies. And it sounds like Ridge is a fascinating journey. And I really want to thank you for taking the time to join me and sharing with me a little bit about your strategy and about how you're thinking through this world. And you're definitely making me go back a few years and think how I'm looking at this world of cloud, and how it's being projected to companies, and what's going to happen in the actual wave of cloud adoption, because we're just at the beginning, and a lot of the players that need the solution that you're talking about, I understand that why they may have hesitations of just transitioning to the current solutions, because right now their on-premise serves better than this generalized solution. And so it sounds like a really fascinating journey. And thank you, Mati, very, very much for joining me.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.